Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new video of Tokyo Ghoul Rebirth. And today's episode what we're here to do, I wanted to kind of try to go through how to effectively build a team on the game and what I personally look for in terms of trying to make a good synergy. Because a lot of people have been asking me for a tier list, but I'm personally kind of against the idea of that because I believe more in the idea of finding out what to do to make a good team and what you need to pull on banners. So instead of being like, definitely pull on Black Reaper, he's SSS plus, I'd sooner say why Black Reaper is good and why I would want to pull for him. So we're going to go ahead and go into edit, and I'm going to try and explain my team from the beginning and just try and go over why I built the team the way I did. So typically, I build teams around being able to survive the hardest possible levels, even when I'm doing casual levels, because it feels as if I feel more solid. You can see here my front row is based on 2 fantastic buffers, 1 unit that needs the buffing, and my entire back row is people that can swap in to do damage otherwise. So the reason why I have this is Toka is here because she gives to the entire front row 1.5 times attack and defense, as well as it heals them for a couple of turns and heals their status elements. But the important part is the defense and attack buff, because Owl himself is one of the units that's there's very few units that don't do this, but he doesn't buff himself when he uses his skill. Arima does, Hafukuja Kaneki does, Ghoul Hyase does. Basically, a lot of units do have that, and it is something to remember when you're trying to make a team. The reason why I have Owl like this is because he's fantastic with DPS, but because he has no self buff, he needs someone to go alongside him. You can see here he does the very good chance to inflict paralysis and bleed, as well as he does all of the remaining AP he has times 5 attacks. Now, what I find to be very, very worth it is to try and memorize how many hits your attacks do, because, for example, let's say that I have the non-killing Owl at level 5. He does 6 hits. And I'm at a combo of 33, for example. He uses a skill, he gets up to 39, and I can hit 1 more time to get a skill charge, like guaranteed on any unit. Trying to plan the skills and amount of hits around getting the skill charge and hitting like always, like for example, 14, 19, 24 before using your next attack will help your skill charge immensely. Premium Hyase is one of those ones that I kind of use to plan around that. Premium Hyase is one of the ones that I use. I can actually show this right now. On the Queen Squad banner is actually gone now. Oh no. Either way, he does do 7 hits, and so I kind of plan around him being able to hit enemies when they're at combos of 62. That's like my main purpose for him. That's like that's the number that's golden for me. So it's kind of trying to plan around that and trying to build your team around getting to that point constantly. I also have Mutsuki on the front row because she is actually fantastic for being able to she has a good stage presence, which is something you'll hear me talk about a lot. The ability to be on the field, have the damage you need to do or the amount of hits you need to do, and also be able to just kind of control the battle in the ways they need to. For example, Mutsuki's main purpose is increasing the block rate of front row allies for 3 turns and decreasing the enemy's attack by 0.7 times, so 30% less damage from them. So if you don't know what block rate and avoid rate is, it's a flat chance to negate damage. So for example, let's say that I buff the entire front row with 20% block. Anytime an enemy hits me, it does a dice roll, and 80% it'll hit you. 20% it is a guaranteed no damage at all, which is fantastic for trying to avoid hits of anything. It's just a fantastic thing to try and build around. Avoid is the same casing, but avoid is far less common from what I've seen. Block rate is it's just a very common thing for people to have equipped, so it definitely is something to keep in mind for now. Additionally, the reason why I have my back row the way it is actually for a very specific reason. So Fess Arima is one of the units that buffs himself, and so there's no reason to ever have him on the field at the same time as Fess Toka, because buffs do not stack. Whatever is the newest buff you popped on that target is the strongest buff they'll get. So, for example, if I used Premium Heisei and gave 1.75 times attack to Fess Toka, but then Fess Toka uses her skill, the entire front row then just gains 1.5 times attack and defense. The 1.75 is just replaced straight up, just gone. So it is something to keep in mind. Shout out to getting a new follower in the middle of a video. Oh boy. But we're going to keep on going here. So the reason why Arima the reason why I don't find him to be that great, and I've talked about this before, he is a single target self-buff character, and so he doesn't really affect the stage all that often. Like, Mutsuki has a good stage presence because she blocks not only herself, but the entire front row, and reduces the attack of the enemy team, which is fantastic, while Arima only has one main purpose. He gives himself 1.75 times attack, or 2 times attack in a lower tier, 20% evasion, which does stack side by side with guard, so you can have both guard and evade on the same target. Good to know. And he deals damage 1.4 times 8 times to an enemy. Now, in case you heard me talking about the amount of combos, 8 times is a really good amount of hits to get, because that guarantees that you can use it at a 61 combo or anything like that and just get immediately to that point of about to get a skill charge. So you kind of want to plan around finding out what units do self-buff and finding out why you should have certain parts of your party in certain places. An example of this as well is that the reason why I have Fess Kaneki behind Mutsuki is because I never want to have Fess Kaneki on the stage at the end of the turn. His defense is incredibly low with a rockin' out 320, which just is 100 short of actually being a good amount, but he does die very easily, and so what I do here is I use him as a damage swap in, as well as a guarantee to get a double swap to get Mutsuki's skill off the first turn, because skill charges are so hard to build towards on the first turn. Mutsuki's skill needs a lot of charging, so the double swap on the first turn lets me get Fess Kaneki in. He does his damage, Mutsuki gets her buff off, and everyone's doing well. Also, this Kaneki is just featured right now, so I have him on my team, but truthfully, he's not that great. He's just a boy, but, you know, he does his 5 attacks, he does his reduced durability by 2. 5 attacks is not a great amount. 3 is arguably better, in my opinion, which is weird to say, I guess. But I prefer being able to not plan around even amounts of hits, because a flat 5 or a flat 10 doesn't improve your chances of getting a skill charge. It only sets you to the next stage to continue working toward the next skill charge. That was a rather run-on sentence that may not have worked out in people's minds. I'll try to re-explain that. If you do 10 hits, it doesn't help you getting to 69. By that I mean you get the skill charges on every 5th and 10th hit, and so 10 hits doesn't help you trying to build skill. That's how I wanted to phrase it. Hopefully that's good to everyone, and I kind of just wanted to go through that right now. Also some more units that are kind of around that are noteworthy. For example, this Nishiki Nishio, I didn't personally grind him because I don't find him that worth it, but he is a healer. I find healers to not be that great inside the actual game because there's currently not a dire need to use them. Even on JP at this point, there's not really a strong requirement to heal, and if you do, there's always units that do something plus heal. For example, Fess Toka gives you the double attack and defense buff plus regeneration heal. While this Nishi is just a flat 15%, 20%, 25%, and 30% heal, which could be helpful if you're losing on A rank, but typically on an A rank level, if you do get hit and lose most of your HP, a heal from Nishiki isn't going to save you because the next turn is going to hit you for even more again. So it's healers have a very small stage presence right now until we get harder levels that we actually need to try and, for example, if they had like a 10 wave level that was SS rank and every turn you had to pop a heal to be able to keep your party topped off, that'd be fantastic. But for right now, there's just not a huge need for it. Additionally, we do have units like the Rize here, of which are primarily based on doing just the debuff as well as durability decreases, which are helpful, but their stage presence is less because they do no hits and they do no effects on your side of the team. This Rize is good because it does both attack and defense down on the entire front row, so it's all 3 enemies lose at the end, what, 30% of their attack and defense, which is the same as Mutsuki, but even better, arguably. So yeah, it is trying to plan around kinda finding out how many hits you want to do per turn and finding out what you're trying to build towards on your team to actually work through things. Here, I'm gonna go over to JP and explain my team over there because I feel as if it does assist in trying to understand what I work towards on that account. So I will see you guys in 1 second over there. So hey, welcome over to JP, and we're gonna go ahead and explain through the units that I currently have and what I personally do with this team and why I find it to be the most effective build for me possible and how good I feel about it. So first and foremost, the most overwhelming part of my team is Black Reaper. His primary focus for me is pure DPS, and he needs to be able to get the break because this happens more and more often later on where units have this skill, which is whenever you break an enemy, get 1.8 times or whatever times the attack that you have increased. Characters such as Feshirazu, Black Reaper, Takizawa, and so on have this, and so you have to try and plan around getting this skill activated in all your characters on like a phase of a boss, or trying to prioritize only your best unit getting it. So it is something to try to remember in the future. And for example, on the 5th hit, on the 10th hit, on the 20th hit, 30th hit, 40th hit, 50th hit, and so on, you do 1 durability damage. But because of that, you want the unit that has the 1.8 times damage to get the final hit on the skill charge when you're going to break them to be able to get the buff off on themselves. So it definitely is something to keep in mind. And at 100%, you can see here, it's hard to indicate, but I'll try and like circle it on the video in post. But on the bottom here, it says he does 10 hits. And so that's one of the things I don't like about Black Reaper. At 80%, he does 8 hits, and I found it more helpful in terms of building combos. But 10 hits is just a flat, like, jump 10 inside your combo. Granted, you can use it fairly effectively for getting to 50, because on a stage, the damage multiplier goes up to 1.5 times. It starts at 1 times, and it increases as you do more hits. So at 5 hits, you do 1.05 times more damage. So if you're trying to gun to 50 on the beginning of a phase, he is one way to jump up 10 immediately. So something to keep in mind. Now, Shirazu is also here alongside him, and he also has the skill that does the break. And so if I try and use them together on a boss fight, typically I'll have Black Reaper be the one that breaks them, and Shirazu is just here to do extra damage. But if I go ahead and scroll through his stuff here, all of this right here is useless to me. I will never use this because he's an awakening unit. Awakening units, their specials are not affected by improving the mastery of a character or putting dupes or stimulants into them. And so I put 15 of them into him at one point, I think. Yeah, he's at 15%, but in general, you only need to have him at 0% because he doesn't improve his actual special, except for his unique skill, which is all the way at 5 dupes, which is difficult to attain. But Shirazu does 7 hits, and so I can remember that and try and plan around it. I think what it is when you do go through levels on JP, my suggestion is try and pay attention to how many hits the enemy or the team you have does do. It's just the best possible way for understanding how to move forward and how to defeat the enemies. With 7 hits from the Awakening of Shirazu and 7 hits from the special of this Premium Heisei, together they get to 14, and 14 enables you to go into an immediate skill charge afterwards. So it is fantastic for building a combo immediately and being able to coast off of it. Additionally, if I go ahead and look through this, you can see here he has 6 hits at 0%, 7 hits at 20%, and so on. I think it goes up to, yeah, 10 hits on the last one, which is kind of... Personally, I would want to stop here at 9 at 60% for him, unless I wanted the AP, but honestly, I don't know about that. Building charge, I find to be more helpful. Granted, if I was given the chance to get dupes of Heisei and put them into 100%, I would. I'm just talking about stimulant investing and what I personally find worth it for stimulants. Obviously, if you pull a dupe, you want to put it into them and improves them greatly regardless, so yeah. Additionally, Black Reaper, he is a unit that gives himself 30% guard and avoid when he uses a special, but it does not affect the entire front row. And so the reason why I have him here is because Mutsuki's behind him to give guard to Shirazu and Premium Heisei if they need it on a level, which it's a helpful tactic, I find, because Mutsuki's buff is so helpful and it has the attack down on it, which is just amazing for fighting bosses. A rank is especially easy because this guarantees I can have a guard rate on the entire front row, as well as an avoid rate on Black Reaper. That's kind of what that row is based on. It's DPS in the front, support in the back if I need it, and being able to improve my entire front row because of it. The middle row here you can see is basically just DPS. It is entirely based on trying to crush the enemies. Fess Amon here, he is another Awakening unit, and so you don't need to invest in his tree here to actually improve his skill, because this is only improving his non-awakened skill. Granted, it does give it some pretty decent effects, and it does give him AP at the end at 100%, but same thing there. If you use him when he's awakened primarily, improving this tree won't affect anything until you get to 100%, which is a lot. But he does have a fantastic stage presence for himself. He also has an attack down on his special when he is awakened, and so you can kind of plan around that. And if you don't want to put in Mutsuki to get the attack debuff off, Fess Amon is always a weird secondary option you can use. It's strange, but it works out fairly well. He also has some fairly good survivability here in the 30% block rate. Him and Half Kujikaneki have that as their final skill, and block rate on this part of their skill set does stack with the Premium Mutsuki's special. So for example, if I had a front row that looked like Half Kujikaneki and Festival Amon, this team would be fantastic. Black Reaper would have the guard and avoid rate of 30% guaranteed at all times from using the special. Mutsuki could swap in and change the buff of 30% guard on both Fess Half Kujikaneki and Fess Amon into being a 60% block rate constantly, which is just incredible for being able to actually fight levels. So it is something to try and keep in mind for the future. I'm actually going to go ahead and swap my team back to what it was, because I am perfectly happy with that. Here, we'll do this, and we're good to go. Now, the back right side, I currently have Ghoul Heisei there because I was trying to test him out and see what his damage is when he is at his current tier. He's at 80% for me, so I'm trying to get him up to 100% and kind of have him maxed out for the unique skill, which is 1.8 times damage toward, I don't remember if it's ghoul or humans, but it's one of those, which is quite nice. But typically behind Heisei, what I would personally have is Dark Psycho, because this enables you to be able to have your entire front row just be fantastic. Psycho, the Dark Psycho, is a explicitly, she's based on buffing defense. And obviously if you look here a little bit, you can see it says 1.5 times defense. It's hard to tell because it's not translated, but just take my word for it, it's 1.5 times defense. And being able to have her to be able to swap in if I do need it on an A tier is great. Heisei does die fairly easily in the front right row because dark bosses are so common, or just bosses that do a lot of damage, and he has a fairly low amount of health. He has under 9,000, so there's a meme there somewhere. But it's something to keep in mind. If you do run Premium Heisei on your team, I do suggest having someone behind him that you do want as backup to be more commonly on the field. I didn't learn about the weakness of Heisei until my recent video when he died horribly against Takizawa, and so I need to keep in mind the survivability of units as well. It's something that I personally struggle with, and I am not that great at realizing, oh, you're gonna one-shot those enemies this turn. It just doesn't connect to my mind. So I'm trying to still work on things myself and trying to still learn. But that's typically how I build my teams and kind of how I base my stuff around. Every unit has their own abilities, and a lot of what you're trying to do is experiment with what you have and find out how many hits certain units do, what their effects are, and what you're trying to do with them. And in doing so, it allows you to kind of understand the game far better, and allows you to kind of understand what you're trying to attain on boss fights especially. I do want to do a guide on the bosses that are currently around on JP at some point soon. Hoji's one of those big ones I want to end up crushing pretty hard, but obviously that's going to take a little bit for now because I am kind of focused on other things at the moment. Other units that may or may not be kind of not revolutionary, but may be important is like Fest Juzo. The thing about Fest Juzo is his main purpose is being able to inflict bleed to the entire front row of the enemies. AoE bleed is fairly uncommon right now. I don't know if Takizawa's multiple hit with different people, but he only gets his bleed at 30%, for example. Golden Week Rize, I think, is... I don't know my bleed synergy stuff. I can't really talk about this too well. But because Juzo does an AoE bleed the entire front row, you can kind of plan around that and be able to use it even on bosses. Just have him as a backup swap in on, like... For example, if I had no Festival Amon and I didn't want to swap in to get the defense down off, I would have Fest Juzo in the back because bleed is really good against bosses. Swapping him in, getting a special off in one turn, swapping him back out, and never using him again is fine, because he does do the 3 turns of bleed and does help out the entire front row. So, you know, it's kind of planning around that and trying to get whatever. If you can do dot damage, do it when you can. Additional things I did want to cover in terms of what's important in the game. I should probably just go over this from this menu, though. So there's 2 status elements. Is there a third one? I feel as if there might be a third one, I don't remember. But there's 2 main status elements that I currently want to go over. One is Paralysis, of which is one of the synergies currently inside the game in terms of dealing good DPS, but it's less focused on DPS and more focused on survivability. Paralysis halves the AP of anyone it's inflicted on. In doing so against bosses, it halves the damage they can do per turn, and also sometimes will negate their abilities to actually... For example, an Owl boss. It nerfs their damage by a large margin and helps you out with trying to actually live on A rank. So you can kind of plan around using that. There's a character in Eto, the light Eto, that inflicts both paralysis and bleed at like 60%. It is a heavy investment, but being able to inflict both is fantastic. Bleed is it's currently the top way to deal damage inside the game. A lot of the units that have bleed synergies, they stack multipliers to an absurd degree. Takizawa is one of them, where he has, if I can go ahead and look at this, he has this, which is 1.8 times damage to any enemies that are bleeding. Being able to put that on a team where everyone is bleeding the enemies constantly, he's able to just tear through waves consistently, and it is amazing. So it is something to keep in mind if you're already running that. And like on Rebirth, Owl is one of the main ones to bleed synergy, because at 100% he does get the 2 times damage to bleeding enemies, as well as he inflicts both paralysis and bleed on the enemies. So he is just stellar and something to keep in mind. But in terms of what I wanted to cover in this episode, I think that's about it. I just kind of wanted to cover what I do have available and what I'm currently working with. I want to talk about team building and all that. I will be in the comments all today. I currently have no plan. My cat's here. Hey there, Sorai. How you doing? You having a good day? Here, let's we'll do this. So, oh, he wants food. Never mind. So, I lost my train of thought. Shit. Yes, that's what I was gonna say. I will be in the comments all today trying to answer questions and trying to go through everything that people may be asking. I've been very busy this week, unfortunately. I had like... Hey, sorry. Hey there again. I had an appointment like... wait, no. Not Monday. I had work Monday. I had an appointment Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday, or no. Thursday was my first group therapy thing, and then Friday was another appointment thing. And so it's kind of just torn apart my week, and I haven't had much time to kind of sit down and do my stuff. But as of today, I'm finally free from that horror, and going forward, I'm going to have more of a concrete schedule towards things, so YouTube will be that good time. So I will be in the comments today. If you do have any questions about building teams, the amount of hits. If you do want translations of the units that are currently on JP, my suggestion is to use Yandex Translate. I have a link in the description currently. I have them in all my descriptions for Invoke. It's just a translating program that you can kind of use a screenshot. For example, like Gyazo is what I use for this. You go like, wow, I want to see how cool that unit is. You take the picture, you toss it into the image translate, and it just works. It's how I do all my stuff. It's how I personally learn about what they're able to do and kind of how I understand things. So, you know, it's how it goes. Thank you for watching. I hope I'm going to be able to structure this in an effective way in post. It's just kind of, we'll get there. Either way, take it easy. I'll see you guys next time. And bye for now.